There's a strange moment that almost everyone experiences at some point, usually late at night. You look at your life for a second longer than usual. The unfinished goals, the routines you promised yourself you'd start, the person you thought you'd become by now, and for a brief moment, it feels unsettling. Not because your life is falling apart, but because deep down you know something even more uncomfortable. You're becoming someone every single day, quietly, automatically, without noticing. The scary part is, most people don't consciously decide who that person becomes. Their habits decide for them. Not massive life changing moments, not dramatic transformations, not one big decision. Just tiny repeated behaviors. The kind that feel too small to matter. Sleeping 30 minutes later, checking your phone first thing in the morning, skipping one workout, putting off one difficult conversation, ordering food again, telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow. And tomorrow slowly becomes a lifestyle. That's what makes Atomic Habits by James Clear feel less like a productivity book and more like a quiet psychological revelation. Because the book isn't really about habits, it's about identity, about the terrifying realization that your future is being shaped right now by things that barely feel important in the moment, and the even stranger realization that changing your life may have almost nothing to do with motivation. Most people think change happens dramatically, a breakthrough moment, a life changing speech, a sudden surge of motivation. Movies taught us that one emotional montage and suddenly someone transforms their entire life. But real life feels very different. Real change is usually invisible while it's happening. That's what makes habits dangerous and powerful. Imagine an airplane leaving Los Angeles heading toward New York. If the nose of the plane shifts just a few degrees south, almost nobody inside notices. The passengers still eat, still sleep, still watch movies. Everything feels normal. But by the end of the flight, they land in Washington DC instead. Tiny direction, completely different destination. That's how habits work. Not instantly, not dramatically, but quietly over years. A person doesn't suddenly become unhealthy. They slowly become the kind of person who normalizes unhealthy choices. A relationship rarely collapses overnight. People slowly stop paying attention to each other. Confidence doesn't disappear in one moment either. It erodes through repeated self betrayal, one skipped promise at a time. And this is where the book becomes psychologically uncomfortable, because it forces you to confront a difficult truth. Your current life is not usually the result of giant decisions. It's mostly the result of repeated patterns. The frightening thing about habits is that they don't feel significant while they're happening. Nobody feels their future changing while scrolling for another hour. Nobody notices discipline disappearing in real time. The damage is subtle, which is exactly why it accumulates. But this works in the opposite direction too. Tiny improvements also look meaningless in the beginning. Reading 10 pages, walking for 20 minutes, writing one paragraph, going to sleep slightly earlier. None of it feels life changing. And that's why most people quit. Because humans are emotionally addicted to visible progress. We want immediate proof that our effort matters. But habits operate below visible reality for a long time. James Clear describes this as the plateau of latent potential. And honestly, this may be one of the most important psychological ideas in the entire book. Because most people stop too early. They go to the gym for 2 weeks and see almost no change. They try studying consistently and still feel average. They attempt meditation but their mind still feels chaotic. So they assume nothing is happening. But something is happening. The identity is changing before the results appear. That's the hidden phase almost nobody respects. A bamboo tree spends years developing roots underground before suddenly exploding upward. From the outside, it looks instant, but the invisible work was happening the entire time. Human transformation often works exactly the same way, and maybe that's why so many people stay trapped. Because modern life conditions us to expect immediate emotional rewards, fast entertainment, fast food, fast validation, fast dopamine. But meaningful change moves slowly, almost painfully slowly. At first, and there's something emotionally difficult about continuing a behavior before reality rewards you for it. That's where most people lose, not because they're incapable, but because they misunderstand how transformation actually feels. There's another reason people stay stuck, and it's surprisingly simple. Most people focus on goals: lose 20 pounds, make more money, read more books, become confident, wake up early. Goals dominate self improvement culture, but Atomic Habits quietly dismantles the obsession with goals. Because goals are temporary, the moment you achieve one, your brain immediately searches for another. And strangely, people with completely opposite lifestyles often share the exact same goals. Both the winner and loser of a race want to win. Both financially stable people and financially struggling people usually want more money. The goal itself isn't what changes people. Systems do. But there's something even deeper underneath that: identity. This is where the book stops feeling like productivity advice and starts feeling almost philosophical. James Clear argues that lasting change happens when behavior becomes part of your identity. Not "I want to write a book," but "I am a writer." Not "I am trying to quit smoking," but "I am not a smoker anymore." At first, this sounds subtle, but psychologically, it changes everything. Because humans are constantly trying to remain consistent with who they believe they are. Identity acts like an invisible operating system. A person who sees themselves as disciplined behaves differently than someone who sees discipline as punishment. A person who identifies as healthy doesn't negotiate every workout emotionally. A confident person doesn't avoid every uncomfortable interaction because discomfort no longer threatens their self image. And maybe this explains why change feels exhausting for so many people, because they're trying to force behaviors that conflict with their identity. It's like trying to swim against a psychological current. Someone says, "I want to become fit," but internally they still see themselves as lazy. So every workout feels unnatural. Someone wants to become consistent, but secretly identifies as someone who never follows through. So every promise feels fragile. And this creates one of the most painful cycles in modern life: self betrayal. You promise yourself something, then break it, then trust yourself slightly less. Most people don't realize how psychologically damaging this becomes over time. Because eventually the problem is no longer motivation, it becomes identity. You stop believing yourself. And once someone loses trust in themselves, even small goals start feeling emotionally heavy. But Atomic Habits offers a surprisingly gentle solution. Don't focus on massive transformation. Focus on votes. Every action is a vote for the type of person you want to become. One workout won't transform your body, but it's a vote. One page won't make you intelligent, but it's a vote. One difficult conversation won't instantly heal a relationship, but it's a vote. And suddenly, change feels less overwhelming. Because you're no longer trying to reinvent your life overnight. You're simply collecting evidence, quietly proving something to yourself, again and again, until eventually the identity begins to feel real. There's a moment almost everyone knows. You feel inspired. Maybe it's January 1st. Maybe after watching a motivational video. Maybe after an emotional breakdown. Maybe after seeing someone else succeed. And suddenly you feel different. This time will be different. You create a new routine. Wake up early, journal, exercise, eat healthy, meditate, read. For a few days, it feels exciting. Then life returns, you get tired, busy, emotionally drained. One missed day becomes three, and eventually the routine disappears. Again, most people think this means they lack discipline, but atomic habits suggest something much more interesting. Environment often matters more than motivation, and honestly, once you notice this, it becomes impossible to unsee. Human behavior is deeply reactive. We like to believe we are consciously making decisions all day, but most behavior is automatic. Triggered, your phone buzzes, you check it, cookies sit on the counter, you eat one, a stressful day happens, you open social media. The environment quietly shapes behavior while the ego takes credit for the decision afterward. That's why people can feel incredibly disciplined in one environment and completely different in another. Think about how differently you behave inside a library compared to a casino. One environment pulls your attention inward, the other attacks your dopamine system from every angle. Modern life is filled with engineered distraction. Apps compete for your nervous system. Entire industries profit from impulsive behavior, infinite scrolling, notifications, autoplay, food designed to override fullness, and then people blame themselves for struggling. But imagine trying to stay calm while living inside a fire alarm. That's what many modern environments feel like psychologically. James Clear makes a simple but powerful observation. Make good habits obvious. Make bad habits invisible. At first, this sounds almost too simple, but human behavior is often controlled by friction. Tiny friction. If your guitar sits hidden in a closet, you'll play less. If healthy food requires effort but junk food is instant, guess what your brain chooses after a stressful day? Humans naturally move toward convenience, which means successful people are often not relying on stronger willpower. They've simply designed environments that reduce resistance, and this becomes emotionally important because it removes unnecessary shame. You are not fighting habits alone. You are fighting systems, architecture, algorithms, convenience, fatigue, emotion. That doesn't mean responsibility disappears, but it does mean self hatred is often useless. A person trying to build focus while sleeping next to their phone is fighting an environment designed for distraction. A person trying to eat healthier while surrounding themselves with processed food is constantly negotiating temptation. And humans eventually lose emotional negotiations when exhausted. That's why small environmental changes can create massive behavioral shifts. Put the book beside the bed. Delete the app. Prepare the gym clothes beforehand. Remove friction from the behavior you want. Increase friction from the behavior destroying you. Simple, but quietly life changing. There's a deeper problem underneath destructive habits, and it may explain modern life better than most people realize. Humans are wired for immediate reward, not long term wisdom. Thousands of years ago, immediate rewards kept humans alive. Eat the food now, avoid danger now, seek comfort now. The brain evolved to prioritize survival in the present moment. But modern life hijacks this ancient wiring. Because today, immediate rewards are everywhere and they require almost no effort. Entertainment in seconds, food in minutes, validation instantly, dopamine endlessly. Meanwhile, the most meaningful things in life usually reward you late. Fitness rewards you later, reading rewards you later, investing rewards you later, deep relationships reward you later, mastery rewards you later, and this creates a brutal psychological conflict. Good habits feel hard now but beneficial later. Bad habits feel good now but painful later. That's the trap. Humans naturally drift toward what feels rewarding in the moment, not necessarily what creates a meaningful future. Which is why People often know exactly what would improve their life and still don't do it. Not because they are stupid, because biology is powerful. There's a haunting line hidden underneath the philosophy of atomic habits. Every habit is solving a problem. Scrolling distracts from stress. Overeating comforts emotion. Procrastination temporarily removes anxiety. People rarely keep destructive habits because they enjoy ruining their lives. They keep them because the behavior provides immediate emotional relief, even if the long term consequences are painful. And this changes the conversation completely. Because now habits stop looking like moral failures. They start looking like coping mechanisms. That's a very different lens. A person endlessly refreshing social media may not lack discipline. They may feel emotionally overwhelmed, disconnected, lonely, restless. A person binge watching shows late into the night may not simply be lazy. Maybe it's the only moment they temporarily escape pressure. Atomic Habits doesn't dive deeply into trauma or emotional complexity. But if you read carefully, the psychology is there. Behavior is often emotional before it becomes logical, which means lasting change requires more than forcing yourself. You have to understand what the habit is emotionally doing for you. Otherwise, you remove the behavior, but not the need underneath it. And eventually, the brain searches for another substitute. That's why people replace one addiction with another. The surface behavior changes, the emotional pattern stays the same. Real transformation often begins with awareness, not punishment. The ability to pause long enough to notice, what feeling am I trying to escape right now? That question alone can interrupt years of unconscious behavior. Because habits thrive in automation. Awareness disrupts automation. And maybe that's one of the quiet superpowers of this entire book. It teaches people to notice themselves. One of the most destructive ideas in self improvement is the belief that successful people never fail, that disciplined people are somehow immune to inconsistency. But Atomic Habits reveals something strangely comforting. Missing once is normal, the danger is missing twice. This matters more than it seems. Because perfectionism destroys more habits than laziness ever will. A person misses one workout, then thinks, I already ruined the streak. One unhealthy meal becomes an entire weekend. One unproductive day becomes emotional collapse. Humans have a strange tendency to turn small mistakes into identity evidence. I failed today quietly becomes I am a failure. And once identity becomes attached to failure, people spiral. But the book reframes consistency in a much healthier way. The goal is never perfection. The goal is returning again and again. That's what actually builds identity, not flawless performance. Recovery. This feels emotionally important because life is chaotic. People get tired. People burn out. People go through heartbreak, loss, stress, confusion. Rigid systems often collapse under real human emotion. But flexible consistency survives. Someone who can return after failure becomes almost unstoppable because they stop wasting energy on shame. And shame is incredibly expensive psychologically. It drains momentum. A person ashamed of falling behind often avoids restarting because restarting forces them to emotionally confront themselves. So avoidance grows. Days become weeks, sometimes years, but there is something quietly powerful about starting again without drama. No grand announcement, no emotional performance, just returning. One small action. That's how real habits survive. Not through intensity, through durability. Toward the end of the book, something becomes increasingly clear. Atomic Habits is not really teaching productivity, it's teaching trajectory, the direction your life slowly moves, because habits compound. And Compounding is difficult for humans to emotionally understand. Small actions feel insignificant because the results are delayed. But delayed does not mean unimportant. A tiny financial investment repeated for decades becomes enormous. A few pages a day become entire libraries absorbed into your mind. 10 years of avoiding difficult conversations can destroy intimacy completely. Repeated emotional avoidance can quietly shape an entire personality. The future is often hidden inside repetition. That's why habits become identity, and identity becomes destiny. Not in some mystical sense, but psychologically, a person who repeatedly keeps promises to themselves develops trust. That trust changes posture, decision making, confidence, risk tolerance. A person who repeatedly avoids discomfort slowly builds a life organized around fear. Most people never notice this process happening because habits feel ordinary. But ordinary actions, repeated for years, create extraordinary consequences. And maybe this is the most unsettling realization of all. Your life is not built during rare dramatic moments. It's built in the quiet repetitions nobody applauds. The mornings, the choices nobody sees, the private negotiations, the tiny decisions your future self will eventually inherit. That's why this book resonates so deeply with people. Because underneath all the habit strategies and behavioral psychology, there's a deeply human message. You do not become someone overnight, you become someone repeatedly. Maybe the most powerful part of Atomic Habits is that it removes the fantasy of instant transformation. At first, that sounds disappointing. People want dramatic reinvention, a sudden breakthrough, a completely new life. But real life rarely changes that way. Most transformation is quiet, so quiet that nobody notices while it's happening, including you. And maybe that's why so many people underestimate their own future. Because they judge progress too early. They don't realize that tiny actions are accumulating beneath the surface. A conversation, a workout, a boundary, a decision to keep going, a choice to return, tiny moments, repeated again and again until eventually one day your life feels different. Not because of one giant breakthrough, but because you slowly became someone else. That's the strange thing about habits. When you repeat a behavior long enough, you stop performing it. You become it. And maybe right now, without realizing it, you are already becoming the person your habits are shaping. The question is that someone you would admire 5 years from now? Because the future usually arrives quietly, one ordinary day at a time. And by the time most people notice where they are headed, they've already spent years walking there.